Hi there, I'm Scott Lowe. Thank you for joining us today for this Unkeynote. We're driving through a rainy day in Central Park in New York City, where I'm joined by Wes Higbee, who's going to talk to us a little bit about containers. We're going to chat about the world of application development, enterprise IT, what's happening in the world in 2017. Wes, thanks for being here today.
Hey, thanks for having me, Scott. My pleasure.
So as you look at what's happening, especially in the realm of application architecture and stuff like that, we've got a lot of new opportunities that are out there these days. I mean, with containers and cloud and all this other stuff. What's sort of your take of the lay of the land on all of this?
So one thing I think a lot of people run into lately is this container versus VM mentality, perhaps. I don't really like the mentality because I think it's limiting. It misses out perhaps on a big opportunity that's coming down the road here, and is actually kind of here already. But we've had VMs traditionally where you run multiple apps. We basically just took a traditional operating system and threw it in virtualized hardware, and we just did the exact same thing. Multiple processes, treated as like a regular computer. Containers come along, kind of change that perspective, and we start to think about maybe one application or a couple of related applications running together inside of a container. And insofar as much as it's a good idea to compare a container to a VM, it's a little bit different shift than to run one thing inside of a container as opposed to multiple apps in a VM. And that's led to some really interesting and neat benefits. What I see coming is the container itself really isn't all that important. It's the things that we've learned and the things that we've designed with regards to containers. One of the big benefits, for example, is because we're running one app inside of a container, we built an entire ecosystem of tools to help us easily distribute the file system for just that one application.
How do you think this is impacting organizations? What they can do? How's it impacting people's careers? How's it impacting IT as an entity?
And maybe to summarize that up, at the end of the day, I see a separation between the runtime for an application. Sometimes I like to refer to it as a node with clustering software on it, for example. I see a difference between managing infrastructure and running an application. And we've always had that difference. It's even easier today for an app development team to focus on what does their application need to do, not what do I need to run that application?
I agree with that completely. I think hybrid cloud is the future. I mean, we've seen it. We're seeing it already.
Yeah.
And there's just some things you just can't move off site for compliance or data locality reasons or whatever. But there's also this idea that we're starting to pull back from the cloud a little bit. For people who went all in are starting to realize that it's more expensive and can be more complex than on-premises infrastructure.
Yeah.
Are you seeing some of that in some of your own consulting work?
Yeah, I think it's constantly a trade-off to decide, does it make sense for us to do this? Is it our area of expertise, or does it make sense for somebody else to do it? But even just, what's interesting to me is this focus on like on-prem versus the cloud is like one of the main things that we look at. And it's almost like some people will say, if you haven't moved to the cloud yet, you're behind. But I don't see that at all. In fact, I think that that's a limiting perspective as well. Just like saying, if you haven't moved to containers yet, you're behind. That's not true. In fact, I think we need to take what we've benefited from in the cloud and try and bring it back to other environments.
You said something that was really interesting, which was, and I agree with you wholeheartedly, that we hear that if you're not in the cloud, you're behind. If you're not doing containers, you're behind. And nothing can be further from the truth. It's if you're not doing the right thing for your business, you're behind.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. That's one thing that I really wish people would focus on so much more is, we've had a lot of discussions about technology, and I love it because it's what I help my customers with. But that's what I help my customers with. I think a lot of organizations need to stop thinking so much about how they use technology to help themselves. Start thinking more about how they use technology to help their customers. Yeah. It's a big shift in mentality. So me as a consultant that helps people with technology, it should be my focus to know a lot of these things. But an organization that, produces fitness bands, for example, it's not their focus. They shouldn't need to know all of that stuff, and they should defer to other people in the same way that they hope that other people defer to them for health benefits, right? So we need to start looking more outward and less inward, and stop worrying so much about, are we using the right technology, and just ask, are we being successful? Are we helping our customers? And you do a lot more at the end of the day if you focus on your customers instead of focusing on yourself.
When you think about 5 years from now, what's the biggest enterprise IT problem that you want to see solved?
Yeah, I'd love to see people just give up on the best practices a little bit more. I'd like to see people stop using the word best practice, actually. And it doesn't mean that we don't have practices, but it means that we have practices and not best practices. And when we take the word best out of there, then we can no longer say we should be in the cloud, but we're not. We have to explain why.
If I'm a CIO that's in an organization where I have to keep the lights on, my budget's strapped, and my people are having a hard time keeping up, let alone getting ahead, where do I start? I mean, how do I get going with rethinking the way that I run IT and that I manage my business and that I try to undertake the phrase is overused, but just these digital transformation efforts?
Yeah, so I think the first step you can make is just to realize it's very easy to get caught up in the implementation, and that's okay, not to beat yourself up, because that's not going to help at all. You almost have to have compassion for who you are now if you want to become somebody else different in the future, because you're going to constantly slip back into who you are now. It's comfortable, it's familiar. When things are bad, that's what you're going to fall back on. But know that if you continually start to try and shift your focus to more outcomes, or how does this impact the customer, in time that can happen. And if you're compassionate for when you slip back into the other mentality and you say, hey, you know what, here I am making a decision again for an implementation decision. If you can identify it and just put it out there and be open, at least to yourself, maybe to other people about it, then you can almost put the car in park and figure out where you should be going and turn the car around and go the direction you need to go at that point in time.